Welcome to the Kid and Drag Gaming Podcast. This is Kid.
And this is Drag. Remember, if you're enjoying the content, go check us out on our socials. Follow us so we post our latest updates. On Instagram, you can look for us at Kid in Drag. On Facebook, same thing, Kid in Drag. If you're follow us on Twitter, go for Drag Kid In. Also, check out our website at kidindrag.chat. You can find all of our latest episodes. All of our stuff is out there. You can contact us. We can get direct feedback from you and help you get the content you want to hear. Now, let's talk about all the stuff you want to talk about. All right, and today we are here to talk to you a little bit about the Sega Genesis Mini, also known as the Mega Drive if you live outside the U.S. Wanted to put that disclaimer out there. I know we talked a little bit about the retroness of the Nintendo systems and how, we in our episode titled How We Fell in Love with Gaming, but there's also another big player in the market. It looks like, they had the Nintendo came out with the retro gaming with the regular NES and the Super Nintendo classics, and then PlayStation came out with one with mixed reviews, a little bit more expensive, a little bit of noise, but now we're right on the verge and got the pre-orders open for the Sega Genesis Mini. So, Kid, why don't you get us started off and talk to us a little bit about this awesome new retro gaming console?
Yeah, it's been 3 years since Nintendo released theirs, so they kind of paved the way. And like always, Sega's always late to everything, unfortunately. But it was my first console. Well, I got a Sega before I did a Super Nintendo, so I kind of have a little bit of experience in this. They had some really awesome games coming out. I'm glad to see this retro is still alive and popping real good. We're going to go ahead and dive into these games right quick. First off is Sonic the Hedgehog, and I've got many hours spinning that little blue guy everywhere up and down, every which way you can, and running in them spikes, driving me nuts. Did you ever get a taste of that game?
Yeah, I did. It kind of gave, at that time, it gave some acceleration, if you will, to the gaming world, because that was coming out, when Mario was like the big Nintendo play.
Yeah.
And it always felt like a little bit more slower paced game, even though the complexities are equal, where Sonic was ramped up. And if I remember right, all the advertisements back at that time was how speedy and how fast he was. And they really played that up through the whole game. That was built up speed, power ups, and doing all that little spinny ball stuff. I thought was pretty cool. So absolutely played a ton of that.
Yeah, I played it so much, man, that I can still hear them stupid rings popping in my head. But up next is Echo the Dolphin. Unfortunately, I never did get to play this game. I know it had a lot of hype back in the day, but it just never made it to my library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't get into that too much either. I was fairly limited on Sega Play. I know it was, as it was originally, it was a little bit late to the party. And I was already invested so far in Nintendo at that time that this was prior to Nintendo, just a regular NES, man. I already had like 15 cartridges that, were like prized possessions, and I didn't get into it too much. I played some of the high hitting games, and frankly, I got into Sega a little bit more when they came out with their first handheld. But then I did go back and play a few of these games on here.
Yeah, it was a Game Gear. I had one of those. That thing was amazing for its time, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good thing about it. Looking at this list here, I really want to get this just to play some of those games that was unfortunate didn't get to at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Up next is Castlevania Bloodlines. I did not get to play this on the Sega, but I did on the regular Nintendo. I always did like the Castlevania.
Oh, absolutely. This is one I did play on here. I enjoyed it. I think you had a little bit of stepped up graphics off of what originally launched on the Nintendo, which, I think Sega, even though coming late to the party, I think they've always done a good job of bringing their A game. They're not putting out an on par product and chasing it, right? They're coming out a little bit late, and they always have come out a little bit late, but they always bring their A game. So same thing with Castlevania in my experience, a little bit better gameplay, a little bit better graphics than what you had on prior generations with the Nintendo.
Yeah. Space Harrier 2. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, that is.
I couldn't even tell you what that game is, but it's
Yeah, we'll have
there.
to check that out real quick. Space Harrier 2 looks like, have to be my guess. I love how they've got, Mega Drive is listed on everything, but it's like superhuman hero who runs and flies towards forever distant background on a checkerboard style ground. Um, Kind of looks like a quick play. Um, you've got a laser cannon and whatnot. You can fire 4 shots at a time, turn on auto fire. So looks like a kind of an early tanks type game, but yeah,
Mm,
pretty cool.
heck yeah. And then next is Shining Force. This is also one I haven't played yet.
So it looks like you're going to have a lot of catching up to do when you get this out here. So maybe it's not just retro, maybe it's a little bit of new too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like I was saying, man, that's the cool thing about this because there was so many games that were overshadowed by top brands at that time that now I can go back and revisit it.
Yeah, I'm gonna call this Shining Force is pretty much a remap of Zelda, is what I'm getting out of it. Just looking at the quick graphics and whatnot, very much 2D style movement like Zelda, and you're chatting with the townspeople and whatnot. So I'm gonna say this is Sega's answer to the Legend of Zelda.
Oh yeah, that'd definitely be a good one then.
Hmm.
Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. That almost sounds like something Sonic.
Yeah. So what I'm looking at here is very much like it, man, I don't even know, like a Tetris type thing that turned into Bejeweled and all those
Oh,
other type things. Very, very similar to that, where you're kind of a lot of these matching games or whatnot that you see out there right now that started with Bejeweled and have run on to 800,000 different things.
yeah.
That looks to be somewhat what the gameplay is with it's got some type of dual screen where you're trying to match these beans up, I guess.
The Mean Bean Machine. Back then they had a lot of fun with names.
Yeah.
Up next, Toe Jam and Earl. Now I did get to play this a little bit, and it seemed like a wonky game, but I didn't get to dive into. I think it was probably one of those I borrowed from a friend. Definitely one I need to revisit there.
Yeah. It kind of has a little bit of the, I don't know, almost like a Roadrunner feel. If you remember that game when they made well, I actually played that not long ago at the Up Down Bar, but it kind of gives me that feel of that Roadrunner. It's 2D like that, but you're following a roadway. So I'm gonna say very much similar to that game.
Yeah, and then Comic Zone is up next, and for some reason, I still remember the commercial on this. I believe it's a guy that's like retro with big glasses on, and was like a side scroller fighter.
Hmm.
Never did get to play that one either, though.
Yeah, it's gonna be like a knockoff Street Fighter, if you will. But it looks like it has some integrated artwork in that where you're drawing the character that you're fighting and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Looks pretty cool.
yeah.
Different take.
I think it was one of those. It got hyped up real big, but kind of fell on its face. Could be wrong.
Hmm.
Altered Beast. Now I do remember this. This is where you're the side scroller fighter, like a final fight, but with beast and demons and stuff, and you get all mad and turn into a wolf.
Hmm.
That was a pretty solid game. I'm kind of glad to see that on there. I definitely want to revisit that one.
Right. So looking at some of the bigger ones on here that I know, what about Shinobi 3? Did you get into that too much?
I did, but I want to say that was more of an arcade game for me
Uh huh.
that I got into back, when people did that and put tokens in games instead of
Hmm.
swiping cards. But I do remember the bosses in that were such a pain in the butt, man.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna call this definitely like a Ninja Gaiden um, take. If you're familiar with that game, very much similar to the structure and how you're jumping on walls and all that stuff, and of course, you got the ninja theme. Looks pretty cool. I think it would definitely be a fun replay because that's been a hot minute since I played that myself.
Yeah. Uh, then there's Streets of Rage 2. I did play that quite a bit. That was kind of, I guess that was around the year that the side scroller fighters was all the rage.
Hmm.
No pun intended.
Yeah, boy.
But Earthworm Jim, man, dude, I have logged so many hours on that game and it's unreal. There's still catchphrases from that game that pop up all the time, like groovy.
Yeah,
Yeah, he uses his head or the worm himself to whip and crack things.
right.
That game was just well thought out, very awesome. If you haven't ever played it, definitely check that one out.
Mm,
Then they throw the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in, which we've talked about that. Solid game.
sure, sure.
Uh,
Can't miss out on Contra. They had to have their take on that. That there, regardless of what system you played it on, Contra was a solid game. Um, it wasn't obviously quite the same going over to the systems. I think the graphics were a little accelerated. It feels like a little bit faster play when you went over the Genesis version, but very similar play style, a little bit different characters or whatnot, but pretty
That's
awesome game
solid couch co-op game for you and a friend or anybody, man. That good times in that one.
for sure.
Then I'll let you handle that next one there.
There's that Mega Man uh, with the Wily Wars.
The Willy
So
Wars.
Willy Wars, there you go. So it's all the Mega Man franchise. That was a big thing because I think it was a little transformational because it was a little bit of adventure. It was the first time you started seeing, hey, there were more than one path to take. You had a little bit of that in Zelda, but I think Mega Man did a lot for that. I think it had its own cartoon, if I don't misremember. It was kind of a cult favorite because it was a little bit different style. It had the space integrated with it instead of the monsters or the fables or whatnot. So really big hit with the science fiction fans at the time, and definitely a fun game to play. Regardless, that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I didn't get to do the Mega Mans back then, but I bought the one on PlayStation that's got them all, and holy crap, that game is hard.
Mm-hmm.
I was
It
like,
is.
man, I just wasted $6 on this sale because like I'm never gonna play it again. It's so freaking tough.
Yeah, it was that way with Mega Man and Metroid for me, but on the Sega, the Mega Man kind of ruled supreme because that was obviously a carryover, and it was merchandised pretty well, as well as pretty good gameplay and just a new style.
The one thing I will say that they did on this console is you can save at any time, and that's pretty
Yeah,
awesome for these kind of games back then.
yeah, especially when you had so far to go through these things. They were hours and hours in for
Yeah, I got
sure.
I got tired of leaving my console on overnight. Now that I'm adult, I can't imagine how much the electricity bill I ran up.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition. Now, this back in the day, I had a couple friends because I'm a loser, but I'd kick all their butts in Street Fighter, and I thought I was really something special. And then when I got older and got a hold of the internet, I found out I really suck at video games.
And pardon our dust while we tell you about a new thing that we have found. So I really do hope you're enjoying listening to the Kid and Drag Gaming Show. Do you know that you can actually get paid for listening to this podcast and others? I know it sounds crazy, but totally true. We discovered this app called Podcoin, pays you to listen to podcasts. Here's how it works. You listen to podcasts, you earn Podcoin while you listen. After you accumulate enough, you can trade those Podcoin in for gift cards for Amazon, Starbucks, or places like that. You can even donate this to charity if you're down for it, which you guys should know that I am. The more you listen, the more you earn. So here's what you do. Download the app right now on iPhone or Android. I've got a special code for you. Simply use our code KIDANDDRAG, and you'll get 300 Podcoin just for signing up. And if you listen to enough of us on here, you can get a cappuccino at Starbucks, gift card, whatever. So go ahead and listen to this podcast or virtually any podcast on Podcoin and sign up with the code KIDANDDRAG. I know it's going to change the way you listen to podcasts. Now back to our show.
But
Yeah, because
on Street Fighter, man, what was your favorite character?
I always did Ryu every time. Like every time I could get a chance at him.
Yeah, I would do Ryu or Blanca
Mm-hmm.
every
Yep.
time, man. That electric shock thing would just piss people off. Plus,
Yeah,
when you're button mashing, it's like, all right, I got you.
yeah. What about OE Honda? I have to say I enjoyed the movie series of Street Fighter that came out later. I thought they did pretty good job for what they were trying to represent, but that was a really nostalgic movie for me to watch.
Yeah, since they're doing all this retro stuff, I believe I heard they're doing a Mortal Kombat movie again.
Yeah, that'd be good because they did a pretty decent job with the Mortal Kombat movies as well. I think, they had a couple A-list actors in there, at least a strong B-plus list actors in both of those movies. So I think it's time for something like that to hit the shelves.
Yeah, for sure. Ghouls and Ghosts. I did play that game quite a bit. That was just a fun, brainless game
Mhm.
to play. Side scroller. It was pretty good.
Yep. I didn't play Ghouls and Ghosts at all, so I'm gonna have to rely on your opinion or whenever I get one of these things because I'm gonna have to do it for
Yeah.
sure.
It was a pretty popular one back in the day.
Mhm.
Golden Axe, man, I wore that game out. That's kind of what drove me to love barbarians and great swords and axes. That was an awesome game, man. I'm super excited to see that one on there. It's probably the first one. Well, no, I'm looking down the list. It's the second one I'm gonna play.
Well, let's see. Road Rash 2. I did pick that up. I can remember grabbing that at a friend's house or something like that because I was all Nintendo. So when I played Sega, it was usually at my friend's house that missed out on the gaming revolution for the first few years and caught up with the Sega. Um, so I did play a little bit of that. I enjoyed it. Any driving game I like to pick up now and again. So,
Well, that
I,
was that was gonna be my first pick was Road Rash 2, man. I have a crazy amount of hours in that game, and like they rehashed it kind of on the current console. I think it's Road Redemption, and
mhm.
I bought it with low expectation because I think it was like $20. That
Right, right.
game was garbage, man. I was like,
Come
oh my
on now.
god. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Road Rash 2 on here, man. It's the way they had the characters as soon as you log in with the big animated heads and the crazy awesome music that was in there. Oh, that game was
Mhm.
great.
All right. So we've got a few left here. What do you think your top two out of the last round are? Because I mean I got to lean in with Tetris. That game to me that kind of revolutionized gaming and maybe opened it up to the rest of the world because I don't know anybody that didn't play Tetris ever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Tetris for sure. And like here and I never understood it, but in school, man, we had Tetris and Minesweep on computers. And I'm like, why in the world would they put this crap on computers in school? And then
Uh-huh.
now that I'm older, I definitely figured it out because I work in a warehouse stacking boxes. And guess where Tetris come into play? It taught me how to do that stuff. So
Hmm.
kudos for that.
Yeah. So any of the ones that left on here that stand out to you as, hey, this is a go-to.
I think Eternal Champions was a fighter game that was
Mhm.
pretty popular. I don't know if I actually played it or not, but I remember the hype behind it.
Right. Yeah, I have to say this Light Crusader stands out to me. Digging through the memory banks, it kind of reminded me of like a maybe a upscaled Zelda. Instead of getting the right top on top view, you got more of the 45-degree angle view of your character. So it gave you a little bit more of the RPG feel of the game instead of just navigating a character. You were actually getting to see their movements a little bit differently. So very, very similar in strategy. You're still going around talking to people, gathering clues to go find, the maps and whatnot. But that one really stood out to me as a big hit back at that time.
Yeah, I'm sure if I seen it, I would remember it, but I just don't recall it at this time.
Hmm. Got the long flowing blonde hair. I love the animations where you're walking and the hair's actually flipping up behind you. That had to be just a whole new different level of programming that they integrated other motion outside of just the character.
Oh yeah, for sure. And also this console, man, it's super small. And one thing they did attention to detail is that I wish they would have made functional, but it's kind of cool they did it is the where you insert the cartridge, it's
Hmm.
actually flaps. It's not solid piece in there.
Hmm.
How cool would that have been like to one up all the other consoles where you could play the old games on it?
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, you've got double the games on there that Nintendo put out on either of its consoles.
That's
Now, granted, I would say Nintendo has more recognizable titles at a first glance, but I think the playability, just to have the options to play, what is it, like 42 games that are listed on here, I think that's a pretty good one up in itself. I think that's going to drive the attraction to this console at $80. It's right there on top of what the Super Nintendo Classic is and whatnot. And it's cheaper than the PlayStation. Plus, you're getting twice the games.
Yeah, the thing that I've worried about and heard horror stories about all these consoles, I believe, is the cords are short,
Mhm.
which I don't know why in the world they would do that because everybody's got 20 feet now in their freaking house. Majority of them don't want to sit on top of a 65-inch TV. And I just worry about the latency lag, whatever you want to call it, on the buttons. I remember Nintendo had a horrible release with the controllers and hitting it, and it'd just be so laggy you couldn't even play games.
Mhm.
Was
Well,
yours?
I think you're comparing that to today's gaming too. I know, like, if you're going to pick up something in today's world that's current, PC, console, or whatever, the technology is so far in advance, right? You've got wireless controllers. You can literally be 60 feet away and have virtually instantaneous communication. These old things are old remakes are running over wires, so it is going to be a little slower. That probably is why the cords are somewhat short because I know, like playing my Super Nintendo Classic, I've got to have the thing mounted at it's in my bedroom, so I've got it mounted like 10 feet in front of the TV, so the controllers will reach to my bed. You know, that's it's kind of crazy, but if you look at that time, it's really playing to the people who grew up at that time, and that's what we did. We didn't have huge TVs. We had
Right.
like I thought I had the biggest TV on the planet when I had a 33-inch CRT TV, and that thing probably weighed as much as a Toyota, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say, man, I went to a yard sale and they had like a 50-inch tube television for free, and
yeah,
nobody even picked that thing up.
yeah, nobody would want to deal with that thing. That's ridiculous.
Man, but
That's
yeah,
like moving a pool table.
it took two of us to throw it away.
That's terrible.
But yeah, I definitely love that they went with the original Sega look. That's the one I had, which at the time had a volume button on it, man. And it's like, really? I guess you can
Yeah.
plug your headphones in, but I mean, they were just trying to take stuff to the next level, man.
Yeah, well, they had, like I say, they had to do something when they're coming out chasing the lead competitor. They have to have an edge. That is, it's a major. Um, I look at that when I'm looking at real estate at any time for business. You never want to chase somebody into a shopping plaza and come in with a lower quality store and be a competitor. You always got to one up somebody, or you're never going to get the business. So I think Sega has done a good job with this console. We'll see the playability issues and whatnot. It has their normal 3 button configuration on the controller with the D pad and the start button, which is typical from Sega at that time. But ultimately, I think it's going to be a playable, fun thing, especially to the generation who came out just behind the Nintendo generation. And there were a lot of people that picked up Sega as their first console. I think those people are going to have that same wash of nostalgia that I did when the Super Nintendo Classic and the the NES Classic came out. So I think it's a good play. I'm glad to see they came out with a little bit more in the gaming, just to have double the games. I think that's the biggest miss that we've indicated on the show before going over the Nintendo is how many we would like to have seen added
Oh
in.
yeah, for sure. Is there any game that you played on Sega that didn't make the list that you thought should be on there?
Man, I'm digging through memory banks. I've been thinking about that since I started, and frankly, when I say playing on Sega, like 70% of the time I played on Sega, it was on Sonic or Mega Man, and
Yeah,
that was it. I'm
yeah,
sure I picked up some type of sports game of some kind. I don't know, but I was thinking that same thing.
yeah. There's not a game I can think of that was just amazing that didn't make the list, but there was one I had in particular that was called James Pond. I got it.
Knockoff artist.
Yeah, I got it at Toys R Us, and I was like 8 at the time. The only reason I bought it because it had like a mermaid on there half naked.
Oh yeah. You thought you were getting a peep show back
Yeah, I
then.
thought I was going to, man, but that game was tough as hell. So, I figured I'd try it. So if you're listening, you actually played James Pond, be sure to leave a comment and say, I hear you, man. I hear you.
Dude, that's terrible. Yeah, I'm kind of scrolling through some of their overall list of games. I'm sure I played the Adams Family. That stood out to me. But none of the big, huge ones that came out really stand out to me that's missing. I know they got some. Did they do the Double Dragon series, or was that all Nintendo? Maybe they did some of the Double Dragon series.
That I'm not sure at all. I can't remember.
Yeah, I know that's digging way back into memory banks,
It's a
and
very
they
long
haven't.
time ago.
Yeah, I can't believe we didn't talk about Double Dragon on the last episode
That's
talking about
true.
these. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure they had some Double Dragon stuff out there in the early '90s. So that one maybe is what stands out to me as something that might be missed. But I don't know if that was exclusive to Sega or Nintendo or who that was. But they did have like the Double Dragon 1, 2, 3, 4 double, and oh yeah, here's one, Double Dribble. I remember that. I knew there was a sports game that I played on there. It was that one.
Yeah, my cousin was big into sports, man. He always had me playing that game.
Yeah,
Double
yeah.
dribble.
So I think there's a few. I don't know. Maybe they had some of the. I think the early Dragon Ball Z launched with that, the original Sega, but that one's going to be a tough one. If you look at the current, I mean, that's a current title. They're still really riding that title around the Dragon Ball Z franchise, but I'm pretty sure they had some release on that too.
Yeah. Just a couple to go over right quick that we missed. They got Gunstar Heroes, Castle of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse, World of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, Thunder Force 3, Super Fantasy Zone, Landstalker, Alex the Kid, The Enhanced Castle, Beyond Oasis, Fantasy Star 4, The End of the Millennium, Vector Man, Wonder Boy in the Monster World. That sounds kind of crazy. Strider, Bird. No, we already talked about that. Columns and Darius. So yeah, that's kind of the list of the 42 games there.
Yep, that's a pretty awesome list. Any final thoughts on seeing this bad boy come out in what I think it's September? It's going to relaunch or launch.
Yeah, I think once they all get done and get their quirks lined out, back in the day, man, I was proud to have my 3 or 4 consoles lined up that took 25 feet in my room. So now it'll be nice to take up 3 feet and I'll be able to, reminisce in that old memory of mine.
Yep, that's very cool. I think the same thing. I mean, Sega was definitely a big player throughout the, I guess, evolution of gaming. At that time, it was definitely one of the major players. PlayStation was kind of a third leg that came over much later, but originally it was just Nintendo and Sega. So feel free to check this thing out and let us know what you think about this coming out and what you're excited to see. And make sure and tune in to our next cast. We are going to dive a little bit more into one of our favorite topics around streaming. So please check that out and check out our former cast. Let us know what you think. Leave comments. I've been seeing more come across on our webpage, so go check that out too. And that is all we have for you today.
And we'll holler at you later.
Later. And that's all we got to talk about today, folks. This is Drag.
And this is Kid. If you enjoyed our cast, make sure and check out our website, follow our socials. We love feedback. You give it, we'll talk about it.
You can find us at kidindrag.chat on our website. For Twitter, it's dragkidin. For Instagram, it is Kid and Drag. Same for Facebook, Kid and Drag. We take feedback on all of those social platforms, and we'll see you next time.
Later.